Hey, eighth grade. So today we're going to continue our talk about space and gravity and the different types of pulls we have from celestial bodies. And we're going to focus on tides. And our focus question is, how does the moon affect tides on Earth during different parts of its revolution? So the first thing we're going to talk about are, what are tides? They're the rise and fall of the ocean water that occurs every 12 and a half hours or so. The water rises for about 6 hours and then falls for 6 hours. So you'll notice that they can be really drastic if you see in this picture right here, where it goes from a low tide to a high tide. How do they work? The force of gravity pulls the moon and Earth, including the water on the Earth's surface, towards each other. Tides are mainly caused by differences in how much gravity from the moon and sun pulls on different parts of the Earth. So you have the gravity from the moon and from the sun both pulling on the Earth, sometimes in the same direction, sometimes in opposite, and sometimes in adjacent. But all of these affect the tides and how drastic the high and the low tides are. At any one time on Earth, there are 2 places with high tides and 2 places with low tides, so it kind of shifts. You have these high tides and these low tides in opposite areas of the Earth. So you'll notice that when it's high tide east and west, it would be low tide north and south. As Earth rotates, one high tide occurs on the side that faces the moon. Here, the moon's gravity actually pulls a little more on the water than on the Earth as a whole. So it's pulling on the water instead of the actual entire Earth. This difference creates a bulge of water on the side of the Earth closest to the moon. The moon's gravity pulls really weakly on the water on the far side of the Earth than on the Earth as a whole because the distance is greater. Since Earth is actually pulled more strongly, the water is left behind. Water flows towards the far side, causing another high tide. Halfway between the 2 high tides, water flows towards the high tides, causing low tides. So you have this tidal bulge, and one side is due to inertia while the other is due to gravity. And you have this gravitational pull from the moon, which kind of makes the Earth a little more oblong because it pulls on that water. The sun is really, really big, and because of this, even though it's super far away from the Earth, its gravity affects the tides as well as the gravity of the moon. So the greatest tidal range occurs during the new and full moons when the Earth, the moon, and the sun are in a line. Whether that be the moon on the far side from the sun or on the near side towards the sun. The gravity of the sun and the moon pull in the same direction. So once again, you see the moon and the sun on opposite sides of the Earth pulling on that water, and you have low tide at the poles and high tide towards the outside. So there's a few different types of tides. There's a spring tide during a new moon where you have a bulge. There's a spring tide during the full moon where it's on the other side from the sun. And then you have a neap tide, and these are at the quarter phases of the moon. The moon has a 70% effect on the tides, and the sun has a 30% effect on the tides because the moon is much closer than the sun to the Earth. It has a greater effect. Go ahead and move on to your worksheet for today. Once you've completed that, you may be on Quizlet.